imagine an innocent schoolgirl with a sweet smile on her face. Now, picture this same girl committing a monstrous crime that shocks an entire nation to its core. As is often the case with crimes in Japan involving cute girls, with anime and manga-like behaviors, she becomes widely known and across the internet. She is admired, fan art is drawn of her, and fan clubs are organized on forums. In short, madness. This is the story of Natsumi Tsuji, better known as Nevada-tan. In this video, we will delve deeply into this case, exploring how she went from being an ordinary schoolgirl at first glance to a monster. To understand the context, we need to go back to 1997, when the country was shocked by a gruesome incident. A 14-year-old student decided to end the life of an 11-year-old boy right on school grounds, using a particularly horrific method. The scene was terrifying, and naturally, the government began to ponder how to address such issues. It was decided to lower the age at which teenagers could be sentenced to prison from 16 to 14 years. In 2001, in Osaka Prefecture, a man named Mamoru Takuma stormed into an elementary school. I think you can guess what happened next. 8 victims, 15 injured. It all happened in just a few minutes. Takuma was 37 years old at the time. According to various reports, he suffered from mental disorders since childhood, served time in prison, and even attempted suicide. Then he was executed, prompting the government to reconsider the protection of schoolchildren. Many educational institutions then tightened security measures to counter similar threats. We face a similar situation in our schools. Due to particularly troubled teenagers, turnstiles, card access systems, and security guards have been introduced at the entrances. Unfortunately, the age for criminal responsibility was lowered by 2 years, and security measures in schools were often neglected. Ultimately, this led to serious consequences, particularly the case we will discuss today. For most of the story, I will refer to her simply as Nevada. Little is known about her personal life, mainly because she did not share any information. She rarely spoke to those around her, and even when interacting with her parents, usually responded in monosyllables and grunts. Her home life appeared relatively normal. Relatively because she was an otaku, a term used for anime and manga fans. While being an otaku is generally normal, especially in Japan, this case was more severe. She had an unhealthy interest in horror, particularly the most violent and gory subgenres. One of her favorite works was the film Battle Royale, where a group of schoolchildren is dropped on an island and forced to fight using various weapons. She found this concept intriguing and greatly enjoyed watching it. She spent most of her time in her room, browsing the internet, wearing headphones, and listening to music. According to her mother, the internet changed Nevada, and not for the better. Eventually, she created her own page on a platform called Cafesto, an early equivalent of Facebook in Japan. There she could post information about herself and create an avatar. It was on this platform that she met her classmate named Satomi. They became friends and started interacting in real life at school. Satomi was 12 years old at the time, while Nevada was 11. Satomi never had problems at school and enjoyed spending time with Nevada. They even joined the basketball club together and practiced after school. However, eventually, Nevada had to leave the group to focus on her studies. At the time, leaving the club may not have seemed like a significant event, but it likely served as a catalyst that triggered Nevada's problems. As we delve further into her story, this becomes evident. Her unhealthy fascination with violence, death, and cruelty, combined with her isolation and lack of social interaction, ultimately led her to engage in quite bizarre behavior. Nevada-chan became increasingly accustomed to isolating herself from the world. The internet became almost her only place for communication. According to her classmates and teachers, her grades were slightly above average, and she was described as a quiet and calm girl, an ordinary, unremarkable student. However, this continued only until the 5th grade, when her mental state began to deteriorate. Many noticed that she suddenly became unable to make eye contact during conversations and started flying into a rage over minor things. These trivial matters, which seemed insignificant to others, greatly irritated her. She insulted her classmates and sometimes even threateningly held a utility knife. In the future, Nevada saw herself as a manga author or artist. She started practicing and writing her own stories. One of her stories was very similar to Battle Royale, where all the students were forced to fight until only one survived. Interestingly, all the characters had names and personalities suspiciously similar to her own classmates. She even devised cruel and creative ways for each of them to meet their end in her story. Next, we delve into the events leading up to the crime itself. If you recall, Nevada had a friend named Satomi, with whom she had almost stopped interacting after leaving the basketball club. Somehow, they managed to rekindle their friendship, though it was somewhat strained. One day, in a playful mood, Nevada jumped on Satomi's back at school just for fun. Satomi jokingly told her that she was heavy. Nevada was stunned by this comment and angrily responded, "Don't be rude," despite being quite thin, and Satomi saying it in jest. Nevada was deeply offended by the comment. Soon, Nevada's classmates started to dislike her, and over time, her relationship with Satomi deteriorated. Then came the usual school skirmishes. Satomi wrote something about Nevada on her Cafesto profile. Nevada accessed her account and deleted her avatar. At the same time, she had arguments with several other kids. These were ordinary childhood squabbles, but then Satomi did something she shouldn't have. Especially considering Nevada's mental health, Satomi wrote about her again, this time genuinely insulting her by calling her heavy once more, probably because the previous comment had elicited a negative reaction. Nevada, trying to save face, demanded that Satomi retract her words and delete the comment. Naturally, Satomi refused. Nevada became increasingly frustrated by the ongoing insults and her inability to do anything about it. Eventually, she resolved to deal with Satomi once and for all. She contemplated this for a long time, considering various methods. As she later described, these ranged from a knife for cutting ice to simple strangulation. And then the last day of summer arrived. It should be noted that the Japanese school year starts in April, with summer vacation running from late July to late August. So students were still working a few hours after classes began. The students started preparing for lunch. Nevada approached Satomi and asked her to come with her for a moment. She led her to an empty classroom at the end of the hallway and closed the blinds. Then she seated Satomi on a chair and coldly told her that today she would die. Nevada then asked if Satomi wanted her to cover her eyes with a handkerchief when it happened, but she refused. Nevada then covered Satomi's eyes with her right hand and with her left took out a utility knife. With a swift motion, she slashed Satomi's throat from behind. In a panic, Satomi leapt off the chair and tried to fight back, which prompted Nevada to act. She struck Satomi several times on her arms, particularly on her right wrist. Satomi, suffering from severe blood loss, quickly fell to the floor. After a brief struggle, Nevada crouched beside her and waiting until Satomi stopped moving. Once she was certain that Satomi was dead, Nevada went back to her classroom. She returned to the classroom completely covered in blood. She stood there with a bloody knife and a handkerchief clutched in her hand. The teacher, thinking she might have injured herself somehow, rushed over to check her, but found no wounds. Naturally, the teacher started to panic and demanded answers. Eventually, Nevada spoke up. "This isn't my blood," she said, pointing toward the classroom where she had just witnessed the final moments of Satomi's life, and added, "I did something bad." Nevada led the teacher to the body, sobbing all the way. As soon as the teacher saw Satomi lying in a pool of blood, she immediately called for help. At that time, Satomi was still breathing. Other teachers and students rushed to the scene and saw blood spattered on the walls. An ambulance was called right away. By the time the paramedics arrived, Satomi's heart had already stopped. She died from blood loss. Taking her to the hospital would have been futile. At some point, Satomi's father arrived and witnessed the horrific scene himself. The cuts on her neck were up to 10 centimeters deep, and the cuts on her left wrist were so deep that the bone was visible. The scene was so horrifying that many students and school staff ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. The attacker, the seemingly mild-mannered 11-year-old girl, was taken into custody. She decided to open up a bit. She was interrogated voluntarily. She confessed to the investigators that she had attacked Satomi. She admitted that she realized she had done something bad, which was, to say the least, an understatement. Her mother rushed to the police station, trying to extract some information from Nevada and find out what had happened. But Nevada mostly cried and remained silent. Nevada spent the night at the police station. Crying and refusing food, she repeatedly apologized to every officer who happened to pass by. For a while, she was unwilling to explain the reason for her attack on Satomi, which confused the police and made them literally beg for answers. At first, she simply said she had no motive, that she did it just because. It is possible she began to realize how absurd this sounded and felt embarrassment or shame. We will never know for sure. But soon after, she confessed to the police that the murder was triggered by an argument online. She told the police that Satomi had once been her close friend, but started posting comments about her online that she disliked. She said, "I asked her to stop, but she didn't. We argued, and I got tired of it," Nevada said. Naturally, the public was shocked when the details of the murder became known, mainly due to the children's ages and the brutality of the attack. Satomi's father sent a press conference. saying he couldn't imagine how such a thing could happen. He could not understand how it occurred and couldn't come to terms with the loss of his daughter. It's worth noting that just before this, the age at which a teenager could be imprisoned had been lowered to 14 years. Nevada was only 11 at the time, so this change did not benefit her. Ultimately, she was placed in a juvenile detention facility for 2 years, but her sentence was extended by another 2 years due to her inability to communicate with others. It was later discovered that she had Asperger's syndrome. For those interested, you can look up what it is. In 2008, when her sentence expired, the authorities did not push for an extension. However, Nevada had the option to decide whether to stay or leave. Ultimately, she was released in 2013, when she was 20 years old. She has been doing everything possible to reintegrate into society, and it must be noted that Nevada's popularity skyrocketed after the incident. Sweatshirts with the English inscription Nevada quickly sold out. When the university's store realized the reason for the popularity, they immediately discontinued the item. Nevada's fame transcended the internet, spreading into the real world. She became a popular cosplay figure among Japanese and beyond. Hundreds of artworks were created featuring her, ranging from relatively harmless to extremely violent. In conclusion, Nevada-chan's story is undoubtedly tragic, but it also sheds light on issues related to mental health and societal pressure. It demonstrates how easily a person can be consumed by their obsessions and the long-lasting consequences that cyberbullying can have.